Chapter 11, Healer. It was day 3 since the start of our vacation. The tent brightened from the sun rising. I could hear the birds singing to one another and the sounds of awakening campers beginning their morning chores. My dreams were all over the place, causing me to toss and turn most of the night. This had been a struggle for most of my life. I had no way to shut them off. Before the union with Mike, some dreams had become intense and vigorous, as if they were real. The nightmare ones were draining. Awakening on those mornings was the worst. Sheets damp from my sweating body, heavy breathing, tears pooling in my eyes, and my heart pounding like a blacksmith hammering in my chest. But as the years went on, I took control by accepting them, listening to them, understanding that when my mind was in a subconscious state, it was trying to forewarn me, to show me what was to come. Since the union with Mike, my dreams have been fewer and calmer, but for some reason, last night were flashes of Jasper in a way I didn't want to have to happen. I needed to rid my mind of the images. Mike was sound asleep. I thought this would be a good opportunity to clear my head in the right mentality before I had this awkward talk with Zeke. I grabbed the uniform laying on the table, the same blue and orange as the rest of the crew's. I pulled that over my head and buttoned up my pants. A small mirror sat on the table. As I stared at the twin flame symbol on the t-shirt, I pulled back half of my hair with a hair tie. I took a deep breath in and slowly let it out. A feeling of finally belonging set in and reassurance needed. My piece of amber sat next to the mirror. I brought that along for my walk. I snuck out of the tent and left the camp. I strolled through the woods, touching every tree I walked by, trying to connect to nature. The forest came to life with every new sound, smell, and sight. The ground was damp from the overnight rain, and with every step, the water on the green brush tickled my legs. The smell of morning dew was refreshing. The air was warm, but the small breeze blowing through my hair was pleasant. Above me in the trees was the echo of birds continuing to chirp, and I heard a small animal scurry through the bushes in the opposite direction. Close to the camp was a wide, slow-moving stream. The fresh water was muddy but transparent like my grandmother's morning hot tea. The light from the sun shone through the trees and glistened on top of the water, joyous and sparkling, inconceivable beauty. The rivers back home couldn't compare to the rivers here. I removed my shoes and socks. My feet sank into the earth and the soil rubbed between my toes. I stepped toward the water and knelt. The current flowed slowly through my fingers. The movement felt revitalizing. I then lifted my hand out of the water and watched as the small droplets fell off the tips of my fingers and back into the stream. I cupped my hands together to scoop the cool, fresh water, closing my eyes and holding my breath as the water splashes onto my face, sliding my hands down my face and taking in the fresh air while opening my eyes. I reached down one more time to run the water over my face. The refreshing water lightened my mood, numbing me to the outside world. The rush for more was desired. Gazing around in all directions to see no one in sight, I lifted my shirt over my head and took off my pants, leaving my undergarments on. I stepped down into the stream, and the cool water sent goosebumps on my legs. The further and further I stepped sent chills up my body, but I adjusted quickly to the cool temperature since the air was fairly warm. The top of the water reached just above my breasts. It wasn't deep, but enough for me to go under. I removed my hair tie and placed it on my wrist. I held my breath and bent my knees to allow the water to cover my head. Sitting under the water felt so rejuvenating, as if I'd found the fountain of youth. All my worries disappeared briefly. Not a sound was to be heard. A feeling of ecstasy passed through my veins. I was in a paradise of sheer bliss, for once feeling atop of the world instead of the weight on my shoulders, holding me down, crushed by problem after problem. I watched my air bubbles float up to the surface. Then my head came above the water. I inhaled the air through my nostrils and exhaled through my lips as I slid my fingers through my wet hair. I repeated this action a few times, but finally I took a huge breath in and stayed under longer. Suddenly something happened. My eyes became warm and time stood still. Oddly, I couldn't breathe in the mystical freeze similar to my triggers, but this one was different. In front of me stood a tall tree with very large roots buried deep into the ground, so deep that this tree had to be interconnected with other tree roots. This was no memory of mine, but I embraced the vision. The tree stood over 200 feet tall, its base over 20 feet wide. The tree must have been thousands of years old to be that enormous. The orange leaves sparkled, and around the base of the tree were white datura flowers like the ones around camp. I felt a connection unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. While staring at this beautiful perennial, something caught my eye. Bits of orange, red, and yellow shimmered from the tree bark. Is the tree trying to speak to me? I need to know. My hand reached out to touch it. The tree was trying to show me something, but suddenly I heard a noise. The sound was faint, but it almost sounded distressed. The flames of orange resumed back to my normal blue, and the tree disappeared from my sight. I came back to the surface to take in some air, and over at the edge of the stream was Zeke, jumping, waving, and screaming at the top of his lungs. What was he doing? Get out of the water, hurry, he shouted. Alligator! Alligator? I turned around, my eyes widened as this large 400-pound reptile swam toward me. I panicked and swam for Zeke. Hurry, Amber, he's right behind you. My heart raced, and there was no time for me to turn around to use my powers. Zeke quickly removed his jacket, dropped it, and darted into the water while reaching out his left hand. I was about 15 feet away from him. As the water grew shallow, I was able to stand up to slide through the moving water, going as fast as I could. But then my right foot sliced on something sharp, and the pain shot through my foot. The alligator slid through the water, approaching me fast. Amber, take my hand, Zeke demanded, his hand reaching for me. The huge alligator was 2 feet from me, and my left hand grabbed a hold of Zeke's, squeezing as hard as I could. His strong, muscular arm tossed me to the side. The alligator lunged at the same time Zeke dodged to the left. He took his large knife, swung his arm around, and thrusted it into the side of the reptile's neck. We moved backward as the alligator jumped back and wiggled side to side from agony. Blood filled in the water, and after about 20 seconds, the animal stopped moving. I crawled out of the water. Zeke assisted me. He grabbed his jacket to cover me. I was curled in a ball on the ground, trying to catch my breath and slow my heart rate down. He sat down beside me, and we stared out at the floating animal. You saved my life, I said. Thank you. Then it came to me. Wait, did you follow me to the river? You saw me. He stopped. These waters are full of alligators, he snapped, and they don't like people invading their homes. I didn't know, I stuttered. Just promise me you won't go swimming in the water again. I'd hate to see something bad happen to you, Zeke said with a concerned look on his face. He noticed my bloody foot. Your foot, it's bleeding, he shouted. I glanced down to see a huge cut on my foot. Terrified by the aggressive animal, I'd completely forgotten about stepping on something sharp. We need to get you back to first aid, he insisted as he stood up quickly. I reached up for his hand. Zeke, wait. Oh, do you need me to carry you? Here. He reached down to pick me up. No, sit, I declared. Just watch. He knelt back down beside me, curious about what I wanted to show him. My right hand hovered over my wound. Both eyes glowed orange flames as I focused on my energy. It moved through my body and emerged from my hand. Orange waves swirled around the air. Zeke stared in amazement as the wound healed right before his eyes. The warmth in my eyes stopped once the healing process finished. He reached down to examine my foot and wiped the blood off. How did you do that? He asked, his mouth agape. Well, I'm kind of like you. I'm a healer, but instead of healing with medicine, I heal with energy. It is one of my special abilities. That's so awesome, he said excitedly. That is way cooler than me spending hours in first aid making headache medicine with my chemistry lab, or me trying to bandage a camper's wound and waiting for it to heal. You can just wave your hand like a magic wand and poof, healed. He stood up and his facial expression looked like he was deep in thought, but I knew better than to tap into his mind. So does that mean you can't die? He asked. That was a good question. I'm not sure. Never really thought about that. If I could heal myself from anything, was it possible to die? He reached his hand out to help me up. I wrapped his jacket tight around my body, which barely covered my bottom. What if you live forever? How cool is that? We stared at each other as I tried to figure out how to start the conversation about what happened yesterday. It needed to be addressed, but I felt like he was avoiding this talk. Suddenly, his eyes glistened, one flame of orange and the other crystals of ice. Mine triggered and unexpectedly shined as well. What are you doing? I asked. I was about to ask you the same thing, Zeke replied. I found myself locked into his eyes, stuck in his mind through a hypnotic state. He also couldn't control what was occurring between us. The flames got brighter and the ice got thicker. I pushed past it to see a vision, the same tree I'd seen earlier. Wow, that tree is huge, he exclaimed. You can see it too? I questioned. Zeke could see what I saw, but how was that possible? My visions were never shared with anyone other than Mike, and I had been shielding myself from allowing him in. We stared together at this tree, speechless. The orange leaves shimmered in the light. The tree bark glistened with orange and yellow. Then the vision broke as Evan and Alex came rushing over. Our eyes returned to normal. Everything good? Alex asked. We heard screaming. I pulled the jacket around me tight with my arms crossed. Yeah, we were good, I acknowledged. I almost died from an alligator attack, but Zeke saved me. Zeke and I glanced at one another, but neither one of us mentioned the vision we'd seen. These waters are the homes of alligators. Never swim alone. Everyone knows this, Alex snapped. The guys started to head back to camp. She scanned around for my clothes and then handed them to me. I didn't want a lecture right now from Alex on my stupidity. I got dressed in silence as I continued to analyze how Zeke and I connected. Alex took a big breath and sighed. Sorry I snapped, she apologized. We started walking toward the camp. I would hate to see you get hurt, she stated. Zeke said the same thing. Their hearts were in the right place. I thought you didn't like me, I said. No, it's not that. I struggle with, jealousy. You are jealous of me? I asked. Amber, who wouldn't be? You're beautiful, smart, strong, and you have powers that others would die to have. This entire time, I thought you hated me. Well, not so sure about the smart part, I emphasized. I was inches from becoming an alligator's dinner. We both chuckled as we continued through the forest. This was probably the first time I saw her laugh. It was nice to see her come out of her hard shell. There's something I've been wanting to talk to you about, Alex declared. I had a dream not that long ago about your grandmother. You have dreams too? I questioned. Yes, that's how I knew about your healing abilities. She too was a healer. My grandmother never shared that with me. I didn't know that. So wait, does that make her a star child? I asked. No, Alex replied. Your grandmother was a light worker sent from the heavens to birth a star child. That's how all of us became star children. My grandparents were both light workers, and my dad was a star child. His powers never awoken either, just like your mother's. But your grandmother was the only light worker with healing abilities. Interesting. So I tried to process this. It filled my curious mind with more questions. But if she was a healer, why didn't she just heal herself when she was sick? She said her fight was over, Alex said. It was her time to continue. It was your time to continue her path. I stopped walking and grabbed my dove necklace. That answered whether I could die. When your grandmother passed away, your healing abilities awoke. Now I understood why I hadn't had a cold or any type of sickness since then. Did she say anything else? I asked. She said, heal your heart, heal the world. Not exactly sure what that meant. Figured you would. I recalled her saying those words in my last trigger, but I didn't share this with Alex. I'm not sure either, I replied. My heart is fine. She continued to walk. That's pretty much it. As I was slowly learning more of who I was, many unanswered questions remained. Why didn't my grandmother tell me the truth about her, and why the secret? More questions rolling through my thoughts. Why was my grandmother the only light worker with healing abilities? Why did she pass them to me? Was my grandfather a light worker? The feeling was itching inside me to know more.